Today's podcast is maybe a little different than some of them that we've done in the past in the history of the show. But today we welcome Marc Erickson from AutoMeter. And I think what fascinates me about this conversation is growing up as a motorsports junkie, still to this day, really follow high performance cars and motorsports in general very closely. AutoMeter's been this name in the industry since I was a little kid that has been iconic and one that I am really excited to dive into. So welcome to the show, Marc.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
And where are you joining us from, Marc? Are you where are you based out of?
Rockford, Illinois. AutoMeter is based out of Sycamore, Illinois.
Sycamore, Illinois. Okay. I think growing up in Wisconsin, I had no idea that it was that close to us. And I talked about that iconic brand. It's been around for a long time, hasn't it? It's been one of those brands in high performance that has just been a staple, and I think one that is pretty cool.
Well, I grew up in Cherry Valley, Illinois, and when I was born, there was a race car in my garage. So there's actually pictures from the late 60s, early 70s of my dad's race car that actually had AutoMeter decals on it. So I literally grew up maybe 25 miles from AutoMeter. And until I literally saw the ad in the paper for them, I had no idea they were in Sycamore, Illinois either. So I mean, I can completely understand where you're coming from.
I have just a quick fun story about Autometer. Back when I was growing up, this is before internet days, right? I would go through a lot of the hot rod magazines or the racing magazines and look at all of the advertisements. And I would always call and ask for a catalog because back in the day, that's kind of what you did. And what I was really wanting were the decals, because then on my little toolbox that I had as a kid, I could plaster my toolbox with decals. And I'll never forget, AutoMeter was very, very kind, and sent me kind of a bunch of different decals. I don't know who did it back in the day, but it was for a kid growing up in around cars and around racing. That was such a cool thing. And they probably knew when I called in that I was some kid that probably wasn't going to spend money, but they still spent the time to send me a catalog and send me the decal. So I'm forever appreciative of that.
Yeah, we still send out decals to this day, and we give thousands and thousands of decals out at the shows that we attend every year.
I bet it's a cool logo, and we'll get to all of the branding and a lot of stuff in this podcast. But similar to the other episodes, I want to start with you. How did you get into this crazy world?
So, like I said, my dad was a drag racer, so I was born with an actual race car in my garage. So I had the hook set very, very deep and so I got into it when I was 18. I applied for a job at a Chevy dealership and I started delivering parts and then moved up to the counter. And then my dad and my brother have been in the material handling business for, I don't know, my dad was in it for 50 years, but so being a parts guy, I went into the material handling business for quite a few years and got lucky enough to see an ad in our local paper here in Rockford for AutoMeter. And I'm like, wow, I never realized, you think, all right, back when I was younger, like you said, without the internet and everything, that every high performance company was based in California. That's just what you thought. I mean,
That's what you thought.
so I'm like, oh, I love this. I'm going to apply for this. And I got lucky enough to get a interview with Jeep Worthen, who pretty much kind of built AutoMeter, was on boots on the ground for 42 years, and got lucky enough to be hired by him. This is my 23rd year at AutoMeter. So, I thought I was in heaven. I used to obviously attend lots of races and everything, and now I was actually getting paid to go all over the United States and attend these particular races and talk about the stuff that, I loved. And so it was one of those type of deals where you never worked in a day if you like what you're doing, uh, kind of deal. And then the hook got set even deeper doing that. And then in 2007, I started building a car, excuse me, in the middle 90s and got it done in 2005. So I started drag racing, driving myself. And then 2007, we stepped up and bought a full tube chassis S10 with my brother and my dad. and we raced that till 2021. So it was one of those type of deals where I was working the weekends and then going back to the racetrack on my off weekends to race. So, it was one of those type of deals where now I still have a race car in the garage that my brother drives. And then I bought a wagon. So I am deeply invested in the high performance, quote unquote, market, aftermarket. So to this day.
Oh, very cool. So where are you drag racing at, or has it changed over the years, or is it still the same place?
So now we have a bracket car. I live 15 minutes from Byron Dragway. So if we go out and run it, we'll run it down at Byron. Before we followed the NHRA circuit. So the farthest we ever went was Topeka, Kansas to Minnesota, Bowling Green, Kentucky. So usually did because of my work schedule. Obviously, I would have liked to have done more, but we did about 7 or 8 events a year. Um, and we had a blast. Doing that and the people that you meet at the racetrack, and the one thing I've always said when I talk to people, I've learned a hell of a lot more about our product from our customers than they have learned from me, that's for sure. You go out and talk to different people, and the nice part about being a racer myself is if I had made any stupid mistakes with our product or anything like that. I had done it, so I kind of, yeah, I've done this before. This is what needs to probably happen or what's wrong with it. So you get a lot of you get a lot of street cred with your customer when it's something that you've actually used and done yourself.
Do you recall your first drag race?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. It's kind of funny. 1976 Bowling Green. I don't know if this is the first drag race that I recall because
Sure.
I probably went with my dad down to Byron several times when they were racing. But 1976, we went to Bowling Green, Kentucky for the Sports Nationals, and probably the only reason that I remember going to that is the actual racetrack down there has an amusement park in it. So I remember a little bit about the drag strip, but a lot about the amusement park. My mom and dad went down there with me. So that's kind of the first thing that I remember. And then I kind of remember going to Byron a little bit and everything. And then in 1977, we went down to Indianapolis Raceway Park for the very first time where they have the U.S. Nationals. What I couldn't go to the U.S. Nationals till I was 16, and they had a divisional race down there. So I got to go to the divisional race for a long time before I got to go to the U.S. Nationals.
When was the first time you sat in a car then to drag race?
The first pass I ever made was 2005. That was the first. So, um, I had a gentleman here in Rockford, and he welded the chassis, but him and I built the car. We probably got it 80% complete, and then my dad kind of took it over and finished it, maybe another 15%, and then him and I did the 5% at the end. So it was a long, drawn out process, especially when I started at AutoMeter. When I first started, I was traveling 25 weekends a year, which would include Wednesday through Sunday. So there just wasn't a lot of time to work on it. We work on it during the winter and all that stuff. Then it's one of those type of deals where you just have to tell yourself, we're going to get it done, or it's just going to sit there and do absolutely nothing. So I finally said, we just need to set a date. This is the date we want it done, and hopefully maybe within 6 months to a year after that date, we can actually have it running and go down the racetrack. So yeah, 2005 at Byron Dragway is when I made my first pass in the car.
That sounds like a typical car project in general. And you were good enough to get it done. Were you nervous going down for the first time?
Oh yeah, because it was, you do all that stuff yourself. It's a different deal if you have a professional do it that does it all the time. So I'd go do the burnout or whatever and everything. And I'm thinking, all right, is something going to blow off? It was so bad that we had a fiberglass hood for the car. It's a 1977 Chevy Monza Spider that we didn't have the hood mounted because we can take stuff apart and put stuff together. You asked me to drill 4 holes separately. I can't do that. So we didn't have the hoods or the pins mounted. So we actually made the first pass when we went down to Byron without the hood on the car. So, but maybe that was a good thing because I'm thinking
Yeah.
maybe if we mounted it, it would have blown off or something. But it felt like I was going 5,000 miles an hour. And when I got the time slip, I'm like, this thing cannot be this slow. But it all slows down and everything. But, the one thing I will say about it is, when you do it yourself and everything, it makes it that much more an accomplishment. and I think we made 5 passes the first time we ever went down, and we drove the car on the trailer. So nothing broke, nothing fell off. So it was a good day to start how, that we did accomplish what we wanted to down there. It wasn't quite as fast as we wanted to, but we were able to drive it on the trailer. And that was always my dad's big thing at the end of the weekend. As long as you can drive the car on the trailer, everything went okay.
Yeah, I think that's uh, a common takeaway from a lot of people that have raced. And I grew up racing. It was more on the circle track stuff, and it was karts to start, actually on road courses. But the I'll never forget. I think the first time I got in a stock car was when I was like 16, and the only thing I thought about the entire time was one, it was loud and you're nervous as hell, but then two, if I crash this thing, my dad is going to kill me. So I, I just wanted to finish the race and not look like an idiot.
And that was completely understandable. And I was lucky enough to get in a sprint car and a midget,
Oh,
and it was one of those type of deals where I was out there by myself, and it was through Corey Cruisman's school in California, and I was winded after we did 10 laps, and the only thing I walked up to Corey like I said, they took videos. It looked like I was out there pushing a shopping cart because I was going so slow. But it was one of those type of things. I got out and I walked over to Corey and I said, "How the hell do you do this with another car next to you? At least in drag
oh,
racing, you don't have to worry. You're not worrying about the guy coming up or hitting you from behind or whatever." And I'm like, I don't know how you guys can do this if you lay it into the corner or something with somebody underneath you and you have to worry about that guy moving up into you or anything. So you driving carts and stock cars, good for you. Good for you.
well, I can't even fathom running a sprint car. You watch the World of Outlaws or any of those national series, the high limit series now, and I think the same thing. And I don't think the general public understands how difficult it is in general. And I even talk about my brother. My brother was not interested in cars growing up, even though we grew up in a shop. He's now a financial advisor and had no interest in cars whatsoever. But we were down at the Barrett Jackson show one year, and I'm like, hey, why don't you, like, they do those kind of test track runs outside of the event, and
Hmm.
they the new C8 Corvette had just come out, and I said, let's go for a ride in one. And I tell you what, for a non-car person, one, I think he was just blown away by the performance of it. But then two, he had a smile from ear to ear getting out of it, right? He wasn't driving, but it was really cool to see him kind of go through and ride in something that is a high performance machine that's also being used to its capability rather than just kind of putzing around. So it was just in general, I think the respect level that I've got for drivers as a whole is through the roof. And I wish the general public had some sense of how difficult it is, because if you watch a NASCAR race, you watch whatever it is, they just think they're driving around in circles and it's not anything really all that impressive. But just coming off the Indy 500 not too a couple weeks ago, it just the respect level you have for people to have the nerves that they do for that long and to be able to suppress the emotion so that when they get out of the car, they look like they just had a day at the office. And I'm like, I think I'd be crying after some of this.
Well, I know, people don't understand that, especially on the long runs and everything, that's full concentration. That
Oh,
I mean, it's 100% concentration, so, and that's probably what would happen to me is I'd be dazing off or whatever. But, and you get out of a sprint car, if you ever go down, like my dad went to Knoxville one time and
oh,
he said I had to get away from the wall because those guys never lift and they come out of the corner and the wheels are going left and right and everything. And he goes, it looks like they're in hate, but they're completely under control. I mean, and they know what's going on. So I have the I have utmost I have respect for drag racing because it is difficult and it's very concentrated. You can't have anything creep into your mind or anything like that. But the utmost respect for the guys that can just lay the hammer down and go left or right or whatever. It's unbelievable. Absolutely
well,
unbelievable.
and no slight to the drag racing community either, because you look at what happened to John Force last year and some of the crazy wrecks over the years, and the fact that they're willing to get back in a car after that, uh, I mean, just speaks volumes about their mental toughness and the ability to compartmentalize, maybe their personal lives versus when they strap that helmet on. They think differently, and it's a thing of beauty to me. I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, I was in Texas one year and Steve Torrance actually wrecked his dragster. I think it was the second round. And they literally pulled a car out of the top of the trailer and built the car before the third round. And he strapped himself back into it 95 minutes later after he had just, I mean, and it's just people that I mean, that guts like that, it's unbelievable.
Oh
Utmost
man,
respect.
I could talk racing all day, so I apologize for diverting to that, but it is one of those things where I just love motorsports so much. So appreciate you taking a minute to talk about that. How much do technicians really make? At WrenchWay, we work with some of the best shops and dealerships across the country, and we've discovered that technicians often earn more than what some online sources suggest. For example, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that technicians make an average of $47,000 per year, but we know that's not reflective of the true earning potential of technicians. We've teamed up with ASE to create an online technician pay tool, a free, easy-to-use resource for both aspiring technicians and those already in the automotive and diesel industries. This tool lets you explore real pay data with customizable searches by industry, shop type, location, and experience level. Check it out at wrenchway.com/pay or follow the link in the show notes. We also encourage current technicians to anonymously submit their own pay data to help make the tool even better for everyone. Lastly, thank you for your continued support as we work to promote and improve careers in automotive and diesel. We couldn't do it without you. Now, let's get back to you in what your role with AutoMeter is right now. What is your title?
So I started as a tech guy, moved into a customer service guy, and now I'm still on the tech side of it, so I still take tech calls every day, which is, I think on my part is very good because I still kind of know what the consumer wants and does everything like that. But I'm also in national or OEM, national sales manager, and then I do national sales, so I have accounts all over the United States that I deal with. And then I still do attend shows. As a matter of fact, next week I will be going to the Joliet and Fort Wayne, Indiana Power Tour stop. So,
Oh, so cool.
I kind of call myself a little well-rounded on everything. Pretty much the only thing that I haven't done at Autometer is I have never physically went on our assembly line and assembled the products is pretty much the only thing I haven't done. I also do all of our data acquisition, uh, sales, and most technical support on that particular product. So try to keep my hands on a little bit of everything.
It sounds like it. You're a busy guy in general. How do you manage your schedule? You talked about how many weekends away you have. I'm assuming during the week you're just in the office per usual, or is it just kind of a flexible schedule where you're going wherever you're needed, whenever you're needed?
Yeah, so with the pandemic, obviously all of the traveling slowed down. So we're not out, or I'm not out as much as I used to be. So yeah, I mean, if it's Monday through Friday and I do not have an event that weekend, I'm in the office every day on the phone, emails, doing, answering emails, answering phone calls, doing anything else that they need done. Sometimes I have tests and products, do stuff like that. And then when I am called away for an event, I'll be doing Back to the 50s at the end of the month too. Then I'll
In
leave and go up
Minneapolis?
there. Yeah, yep. So I'll go up there. And we'll normally leave on a Thursday and get back on Sunday, and then Monday I'll be right back at it.
That's a lot of work. And like you said, though, I think when your job is what it is, it doesn't feel like work as much, because I'm sure a lot of those events you'd probably volunteer to go to in general, right? So it's got to be pretty cool that your job intersects with your passion at a really, really deep level. And something like the Back to the 50s, like, it's got to be just so cool to go to all these events that you probably heard about growing up, or you really maybe didn't even think you'd go to ever, and now you're consistently at these events. It's got to be pretty neat.
It was really cool because, if I wouldn't have started at AutoMeter, I never would have went to Pomona, California. I never would have went to Englishtown, New Jersey. I never would have went to these particular places. And going to the shows, I really like going to the shows because you're in front of the public. You can talk about your product. They ask questions. You learn about what's going on out there in the industry, what is needed, what type of products are needed. So yeah, being out in front of the public is probably my favorite part of the job.
Any advice on how to approach some big event in terms of, I do you have any do you have any advice on maybe how to pick a hotel that's somewhat close to the event? Do you have any advice on maybe how to get in without fighting the crowd? Like, I'm sure it's a little different for you as a vendor, but you've seen enough of them over the years. Any advice to amateurs like me?
Well, I tell you what, it's a hell of a lot easier now than it was when I first started because we didn't have hotels.com or anything like that. So, you know, I got lucky enough to, hey, call one of my buddies. I'm going to this event. Where should I stay? But nowadays, honestly, with like the hotels.com app and everything, I just kind of go up there, put the dates in, find. I'm the type of guy that I would rather stay close to the event. But, some people, they want other things to be able to do during, okay, I'm going to stay here, but then I'm going to go here, or I'd like to, take the kids to here or whatever. So I kind of base it off of that. And it's weird because being a vendor, and we were always at the drag races very early in the day when my dad and I would attend. So the earlier you get there, obviously, the better parking you're going to get, the less crowds you're going to get. And you could do, the nice part about it now too is if you do a little research on the majority of the show websites and stuff, they kind of give you all of that information. Hey, this is when the show is, this is when it's most busiest, and now they have this is our host hotels or this is the area that so the biggest thing I would just do your research. That'd be your best bet.
That's really good advice. How's eating on the road? I know that's something I struggle with when I travel quite a bit. Not every weekend like you, but when you're out, sometimes the diet takes a beating because you're eating whenever you humanly can because you're running from thing to thing, and at times it's probably not the healthiest. Is that something you've got to kind of keep an eye on, or is that fairly easy for you?
No, most definitely, especially at the events. Lunch is the toughest thing because obviously at the majority of these you're getting, quote unquote fair food or whatever. So, you know, when we're working off, we have a couple trailers that we actually work off of that, they're nice enough. They put lunch meat and stuff on it like that. But when
That's
you're at an
nice.
event by yourself, and then you're absolutely right. When I first traveled, it was, excuse me, fast food and this type of stuff. And then I got to the point where I can't eat this all the time.
Yeah.
I need to have a sit down dinner and maybe, once in every 5 events, you should have a vegetable and a salad, So I kind of got away from not eating at McDonald's or Burger King or Taco Bell every night and actually saying, hey, and now there are more healthier options out there that you can go to, besides McDonald's and all of that type of stuff. And they've actually gotten a little bit more healthier. But yeah, you definitely got to watch yourself because that'll catch up with you in a hurry.
It does. It does. Well, thank you for that advice. Now let's talk Autometer a little bit. The brand is iconic. I think it's iconic because it's a good product, but it's just kind of at the heart of motorsports, right? In any high performance vehicle, what you guys put out for product is always, it feels like cutting edge and really just cool, right? I have to believe the brand is built off the quality of products, but and maybe that's a little bit of a rhetorical question, but talk to me about that a little bit. Why has the brand kind of built itself up to what it is now?
So we got started in 1957. Uh, and the biggest thing is we actually had very early on, they were smart enough to hire a gentleman named Jeep Worthen, who is now in the SEMA Hall of Fame. So Jeep was a boots on the ground guy. I'm going to the racetrack. I'm going to be in front of the public. And we literally, when we first started, we had one of the early electronic tacks, and nobody believed that the electronic tacks were the same as fast as a mechanical style tack. So he had what he called a tack on a stick, where he would literally go, and it was a three-wire hookup, power ground, and then your signal wire, and he would literally hold the tack on a stick in front of the driver while the driver revved his car in the pits at a race and watch the tack do exactly the same thing as what is mechanical tack. And obviously it weighed less because it didn't have a cable that went to it. So that is kind of the way that AutoMeter was kind of built from the ground up going through that. And I think another thing is our customer service was unbelievably good. Um, we started a repair facility and we repaired our products throughout the years. And still to this day, I get people that call us and they say, I can't believe how fast a human answered the phone. I wasn't expecting that. So I think our customer service, obviously, we have very, very good quality products. A guy will come up to me and say, I've had your gauges in my car for 30 years. I'm like, that's great to hear. However, it can't keep me in a job because you need to buy more gauges. So, maybe they need to have a life expectancy on them or something like that. But it's great when you hear people like that, man. Your products have lasted forever. We also did a very, very good job with our marketing, getting in people's vehicles, working with the magazines back when there was no obviously internet or anything. So, getting our products in the magazines, getting them into the right people's hands, as far as drag racers are concerned, car builders. So when people would open up CarCraft or Hot Rod or any of those particular magazines, they would actually see our products in these magazines, not just in advertisements, but people using the products on their vehicles. One of the big coolest things since I started at Autometer, we were inducted into the Hot Rod inaugural Speed Parts Hall of Fame for our monster tax. So, that shows you how long we've been around and how much our products have had an impact on and we were literally at the very first SEMA show when it was under the bleachers at Anaheim Stadium. So, we've been in this since the ground up. We were at the first PRI show. So, longevity and legacy has a lot to do with it. But to me, our customer service is second to none.
Well, and I have to believe that started foundationally, it sounds like, with Jeep and his insistence on being at the track, right? That boots on the ground presence from a leader. I think there's so many businesses and business leaders that could learn from that, to where you have to be present. You have to have your thumb on the pulse of your customers, and really being able to get that feedback, because if you're getting that true feedback, that probably inherently shows you why you need to have a good customer service department and people that answer the phones quickly and actually solve your problem rather than kicking the can down the road, right? Like I was just telling you right before we got on to the recording that I've got a driver's license thing that I put myself in a predicament with, where I didn't get the true ID, the new kind of license that you need, or real ID, I'm sorry. And it was one of those things where I'm kicking it down the can. I wasn't expecting to fly when I had a trip come up, and I knew that ultimately I needed to get it done. But when I call the DMV for help, it's maybe not the most helpful group in the world, right? Like and it causes frustration because you're digging to find the right phone number. And even when I called in, the prompts are kind of misleading, and it's almost trying to it's always trying to point you back to the website and hey, have you done your research? Have you looked at the website? And in the back of my head, I'm constantly like, yes, I've looked at the website. That's why I'm calling, because I can't find my answer. So I do think when in today's society, when a company actually answers the phone and it's an actual human that you can understand on the other line, that means the world, because you truly are helping somebody. And as great as AI is, and as great as chatbots are or can be to get you a quick answer, a lot of it still doesn't replace a nice human being on the other side that truly wants to help you out and shows some form of empathy toward your situation or what you're trying to fix.
That is correct. And to be honest with you anymore, the majority of people are going to jump on their phone or their PC or whatever to try to find an answer for what they're looking for. So the majority of people that are calling are, all right, I've exhausted every opportunity or every avenue that so I called. So, and that's 100% true. The nice part about it is our tech guys, we have a great group of guys that have been there for a long time. So, my big deal about doing this is, like I said, I've learned more from other people than people have learned from me. And when people call us, I don't claim to be a smart guy or everything, but when you've been on the phone with these people for as long as I have, you know about your product. You know, hey, this guy experienced, and we have nice enough people that will call us up and say, hey, I had this issue and you told me to try this. That didn't quite work, but this did. So you kind of put that in the back of your mind or you write it down or we have, and say, all right, the next time somebody calls with that issue, I know which way to point, which way to take him, which way to go, and the biggest thing is, when I first started, Jeep told me, listen, the only thing you have out there is your uh, cred, your credibility out there. So, if people say that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's going to give you an answer that might not be true, that was the best advice that I received. So if I got somebody that would ask me a question and I didn't know, I'm like, hey, listen, I don't know. I'll find somebody that does, but I don't know the answer on this, and I don't want to lead you around down the wrong avenue. Like people will call me up and ask me about gauge, like our AFR gauges, will ask me, hey, I had this happen, and then they'll try to segue into, well, what air fuel ratio should I run my car at? And I'll be like, listen, I can tell you all about the gauges, but I'm not an engine tuner. So you need to talk to either the guy that built your engine or whatever, because I don't want and have something happen to the motor or whatever. And I'll just be truthful with them. That's not my forte.
I think what you just talked about there is really, honestly, I think that's really good customer service advice as a whole, right? Is that if you don't have an answer for somebody, or somebody asks a question that might be a little bit out of your wheelhouse, to be upfront and honest with them. And I think we've all dealt with people where maybe they embellish their knowledge level or something, and maybe it's an ego thing to where they don't want to admit that they don't know this particular subject or something about this particular subject. But it's far more impactful for your credibility and really your trustworthiness if you can just say, hey, listen, I don't know the answer, and I'm willing to work for you to find that answer, but I don't know it off the top of my head. I think most people understand that, right? And they appreciate when they get kind of that candid response, in that not everybody's perfect, not everybody knows every answer, but if you're willing to help me out and willing to maybe work at it and then follow up with a response, that's pretty impactful. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's one of the big things is always call the customer back. Do you get I've been in situations where, you call somebody and you're kind of wishy-washy. It's like, okay, is this person or this company ever going to call me back? So that's why, I'm honest with them. Just like how frustrating it is if you order something or your car is getting worked on or whatever, and they continue to tell you, well, it's going to be tomorrow. And then you call, no, it's going to be the next, hey, I completely understand the way the world works, especially after the COVID
Yeah.
situation. Just be honest with me. If it's going to be a month, it's going to be a month. There's, you're not, the company isn't out there to say, all right, this guy ordered this, so let's, let's sit on this and make him pissed off to send, not send it to him for 2 months. That's not what we want to do. We want to get the orders in and get the stuff built and out the door or whatever. So yes, 100% agree. The more honest you can, and I think that goes a long way for your credibility as a company too, when you're honest with somebody. Because
Yeah.
it may be one of those things like they're talking to their friends, hey, they didn't give me the answer that I wanted to, but they gave me a truthful answer, and so I would much rather. That's the type of person I am. I may not tell you what you want to hear, but I'm going to tell you know I'm going to be very very truthful with you. Um, and I think that goes a heck of a long way in the customer service portion and your reputation as a or a company itself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This week's episode of Beyond the Wrench is brought to us by Jasper Engines and Transmissions. Okay, your customer's engine or transmission has failed, but now is not the time for them to trade their vehicle. Not without a working engine or transmission. Besides, would they have kept their vehicle another 3 to 5 years if their engine or transmission had not let them down? If you answered yes, then Jasper Engines and Transmissions is your choice to give your customer's vehicle new life and many thousands of miles of enjoyable driving performance. When considering the high cost of a new or newer used vehicle, there's a pretty good case to be made for replacing a drivetrain component that has failed or is delivering poor performance. Rather than trading their car, truck, van, or SUV, install a quality remanufactured Jasper product for less than your customer would have to invest in a new vehicle or a newer used vehicle. Check out their website at jasperengines.com to learn more about the money-saving value of Jasper. Do you find that there are certain things that maybe are trends that people consistently struggle with, where you're getting a call, hey, this particular topic or this particular model of tachometer is tripping people up in one specific area, and maybe it's a little easier to explain to them over the phone or maybe in some type of online video, whether it's a YouTube video or whatever it might be. But do you get the sense that you get some consistent questions from general consumers, that it's kind of easy to see what direction to lead them?
Yes. So our particular product, the big thing is in our particular product, we make a short sweep electric gauge, and the way that the sport short sweep electric gauges are resistance to ground. So people think that they can just ground it to a brace off of the dash or whatever on their vehicle, so the gauge doesn't read correctly. It normally when they don't have good ground, it reads high. So they're like, "What's going on with this? Why is my tachometer bouncing?" So on and so forth. The best ground for our particular product is directly to the engine blocker head of the vehicle. And a lot of people out there think wiring is voodoo. They don't want to have anything to do with it's gotten a lot easier with all of the tools and everything that are out there now. It just takes a little patience, but that is the biggest number one thing that we had. And a lot of thing that tripped us up too, um, is when the OEMs came out with the distributorless ignition, because now there's not a coil on there. You can't go to the negative side of the coil. Where do I pick up my tachometer signal from? So we've come out with kits for the LS and the Fords, where we have a plug and play that will allow you to plug directly into the factory harnesses and drive your tachometers. We are going to come out with one for a Hemi here soon, but that was another big trip. And it's hard to explain to a person that has, especially on the LS motors, a lot of the computers and stuff have a tach output. But if you go in and flash the ECU, it 95% of the time knocks the tach output out of an LS motor. So like, oh, I got to buy this now. Yep, unfortunately, you have to buy an adapter to be able to run your tach off of the LS motor. Obviously, now it first started happening around 2002 or something. It's got a lot more mainstream now. And especially now when the aftermarkets came out with ignitions for the LSs and all that stuff, because they actually have an actual tach output on their particular product to drive it. But also, you have a lot of people that are taking junkyard motors out of these vehicles and putting them in their car, and then maybe getting a tune flashed in them, and just they take the harness and everything out of them. So yeah, the tachometers for the coil on plug ignitions and the grounds are the two biggest things.
Yeah, and it's nice. Just the adoption of LSs in general feel like they're abundantly available now. The parts are abundantly available, and there's just more general awareness and knowledge of that specific engine as well. So I could see. I will say the thing that I think resonated with me with what you just said was the importance of kind of the basics, right? Like having a good ground, and I think even going back to any electrical class that I've ever taken, I think instructors could say it until they're blue in the face, the importance of a good ground. And I still think the general majority of people might take that for granted because it is one of those things where it seems so simple, but if you don't have a good clean ground, it creates a whole bunch of headaches.
Yes, and I read a lot of books and obviously got to hang around with a lot of people. And the biggest thing for me is always, the acronym is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. So, and I'll be working on my own stuff and I'll be, off on a tangent thinking about, I'm like, oh crap. I'll go back and it'll be the one simple thing that I should have checked the very first thing and that'll solve everything. So, yeah, and that you got to start at the basics. You got to build the ground up and unfortunately, I'm like the majority of people out there. The instructions are for when you get stuck. They aren't for following. I want to do this by myself, and that's another thing that we've come a long way with too to talk about that is and a lot of people for the internet has helped is there's so many YouTube videos out there and so many step-by-step instructions now. Like on our Envision dashes, we have an LCD dash now that we have step-by-step instructions for the specific vehicle that it's for. So now I remember when I got my Power Stroke to tow my trailer, the interior locks didn't work on it. So I looked on YouTube and it literally showed you step by steps on how to put the new lock mechanism in it. And it literally took me like a half an hour to put it in because a lot of majority people will go out there and post a video, which is awesome because it'll show you exactly what you need to do and how to install it.
Have you ever watched one of those YouTube videos and shook your head because they were doing it wrong or misrepresenting
No,
something
I
that
got
you got
lucky.
out there?
I have not seen that yet. So I had the worst one or the best one I ever had is I have a 69 Kingswood wagon and I had to put a heater core in it and all of the bolts are on the firewall and I couldn't get the case out of the inside off and I'm ripping on it. I'm like, is this thing rusted? I'm like, I'm going to YouTube. So I put and they had something on there that was for a 69 Impala, but you literally had to take the inner fender well, all the bolts out of it, pull it down and shove a 2x4 in there sideways because there was one bolt under the inner fender well and I never would, there's no way. I never would have
I
figured
wouldn't
that
have.
out. I would have
No.
got pissed off and put all the bolts back on and said, heck with it, I'm just going to bypass it. So and a lot of stuff out there you can look at now and it'll be to people, to be a garage or something that repeatedly has videos on there that are well liked and everything. So, there's so many people out there doing that now that it's great because I think for a time there you had even maybe a little bit before my generation, you were kind of afraid to work on the cars.
Yeah.
People were getting away from doing it themselves and everything. And then when these videos came up and people were showing step by step, oh, I can do that. I can spin a wrench. I can unplug a connector. I can do this or that. So I think the more that those videos come out, I think the more it kind of gets people back into working on their cars, especially the aftermarket, because there's companies out there that you buy like a cold air system for a specific vehicle, and it literally has step by, remove this bolt, put this bolt on, remove this, do this, and it has step by step instructions. There's not a lot of fabrication like there was in the past.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. And I use it as a reference for things all the time. And I we've had some YouTube folks on the podcast here recently that do a really nice job at educating people that know what they're talking about, also educating maybe the general public and some of the stuff that they might not know. So I do think it's a very powerful tool. I think there are a lot of people out there that really do know what they're talking about. And I think the ones that might maybe not know as much of what they're talking about, there is some self-policing effort because you'll hear about it in the comments, right? You've got a lot of people that know what they're talking about, and they'll make sure that they correct the person or make sure that they put them in the right direction.
No, I completely agree. Yes, and in the aftermarket, when I first started, our gauges were universal. So if somebody called up and said, I have this car, this car, this car, it was like one of those type of deals. Okay, this gauge will work for that particular car, but you're going to have to fabricate something to put in it. Now we make so many direct fit kits, where you just pull the dash out of your vehicle, put this particular dash back in it, bounce all of our gauges, does all of that type of stuff. It comes with the wiring harness. And I think the whole aftermarket has kind of moved in that direction where before you had a one kit that would fit all, if you wanted to put airbags on your truck, okay, you bought a universal and you had to fabricate now, all right, you literally go to all these websites and you put in your vehicle and what type of vehicle you have, and it brings up all of the stuff that they offer for that particular vehicle. Like I put airbags on my Power Stroke also, and it was like literally one of those type of deals where I'm thinking, oh God, this is going to take all day, and I open the instructions like, oh, this isn't bad at all. Like the worst thing I had to do is like route the actual airline to the back to fill them up, because they literally have it step by step instructions, and I think the aftermarket has done a great job with that because people don't want to go out and buy thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of tools to be able to have to fabricate something. We're now, and that's another nice part about it is the majority of the time they literally tell you this is the tools that you need to complete this instruction. So, and I think we're going to continue to see that down the line that it's going to be, vehicle specific. SEMA has all these measuring uh, deals that they come out with when the new cars come out with, the manufacturers let us do that and everything. So I think it's great for everybody, whether it be your do-it-yourself or your auto shops or whatever. I think it's just awesome that they're doing that.
I do too. Now, you mentioned earlier kind of the perception that electricity is black magic at some level, right? Like where like there's a lot of overcomplication of it. I feel like. Do you have any advice to somebody that is kind of diving into the electrical side of a car?
So, I mean, the good thing nowadays is I installed on a hitch on a newer vehicle that we had. The nice part about doing stuff like that now is people literally have a hitch that will you unplug a factory connector and plug it in and you're wired. I mean, I remember back with my dad when he had his race cars, you literally had to go in there and cut the factory harness apart and then try to put it back together, and he's crimping these things with a pair of pliers or a pair of needle nose instead of the first thing I would do is if you're going to jump into wiring, buy a good crimper.
Hmm.
They're back in the day they were such a specialized item, but you can get a decent crimper, through anybody that sells a decent set of tools. That's number one. And especially uh get a good stripper, a good crimper. You only have to buy that stuff once. So that would be number one. Number two is um, use shrink wrap. I mean, and especially they make a marine style shrink wrap now that actually has uh, glue in it, so it actually gives some strain relief when you do that stuff. They have connectors now that have the shrink wrap built into them, so that would be, a good crimp and a good connection, and make sure it's clean. Like when you're ground, use a star washer. Make sure the paint's off of it when you put that down, so it doesn't corrode or you're not getting paint in the way. But nowadays, they have so many books and so many resources out there. There's so many just electrical connector websites now. Excuse me, that you're going to get good tools off and good connectors and everything like that. So that's the main thing. You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
That's that. And unfortunately, over my life, I've learned that several times that you get what you pay for. So a good crimper, a good stripper, and a good cutter, will go a long way to making that installation. And the tools that they've come out with are so much better now. It used to be just a test light was all you pretty much had. With the voltmeters and the VOMs that they come out with, which we offer, there's so many great tools out there now that will allow you to supply a ground to something or supply a 12 volts to it or whatever. And if you're going to do any type of wiring or, you think you're going to do, this is okay for me, I can do this. Buy a good multimeter or something like that also. That will help you out in the long run.
That is great advice. I just working on a personal project right now, bought a nice crimper and a nice wire stripper, and the wire stripper was the one where I'm like, this this changed my life. Like when you get a nice wire stripper, like how I did it growing up was not even remotely close to how easy this is. And it is that is a game changer. One of those things where you know they're out there, but you don't know how helpful they are until you get it. And it just makes it faster with a cleaner stripping of the wire. And it's, man, that's a game changer.
Well, they make them so simple now is, you're probably in my boat where you would actually use, in your cutter or whatever, they would have like a little hole in
Yep.
there and you'd have to figure out the diameter. Now they literally, you stuff the wire into it. It's got a place that measures how long it should be. And you snap your fingers like that and measures the insulation and cuts it. Yeah. I mean, they're very, very simple now. So yes,
Oh,
get a good crimper and a good stripper.
that is a great advice. Now, as we're getting closer to the end of this podcast, I always ask something that's a little fun. You've been around to a lot of shows, a lot of races. Who's maybe the most famous person you've met out on the road?
So I got lucky enough I got to meet a lot of drag racers. I met Tony Stewart. We sponsored his wing car and his stuff. So I got to meet Tony Stewart, Warren Johnson, and it's cool to meet those guys because they're really just down to earth guys. You get to talk to them and kind of, and it's one of those type of deals when I went up and talked to him, began to talk to him, being a racer and everything, that I got lucky enough and I knew what I was talking about. So I didn't, and that was really cool. Those are probably like the two biggest guys. Now the guy that I ran into. I was in Pomona one year, and James Hetfield from Metallica was out there, and I talked to him for
Oh,
just a couple seconds. And
big car
so
guy.
yeah. Oh, that's where he was at. He was actually at the Roadster show when I was out there, and
Really?
yeah, it was really cool. He was actually in the NHRA museum, and I knew he was building a car, so I walked up to him, gave him my card, and said, "Hey, if you ever need anything." I never heard from him, but it was one of those type of deals where it's unbelievable. And that's one thing I will say, it's unbelievable that you go through these shows or whatever and you see these people pass by and I don't want to bother them because they're in their own space or whatever. How many guys are car guys or how many
Mm.
people are car guys that you would never ever know that they were car guys, so it's been a really really cool experience, to have people walk over and ask me a question or whatever and you're like, gosh, that was just so and so, so, but being a drag racer, like meeting and a race car guy, like meeting like Tony Stewart and Warren and all those guys, Tony Schumacher, stuff like that. It was really cool.
Yeah, we just had Mike Spagnola from SEMA on the show a few weeks ago, and he had some great stories. And we're gonna have him back on before this year's SEMA show. And he had a lot of the same things to say that you did, right? Like so many of these car people are just down to earth and they like talking cars, right? Because maybe, especially
Definitely.
like a James Hetfield, where it's not his profession, but he truly loves cars. He's probably more than willing to talk about cars with you. So it is, every year I go to SEMA or I go to whatever show, and you see some of our car celebrities out and about. It is really cool, and some of them that you talk about. I saw Mario Andretti one year at SEMA, and kind of got the opportunity to shake his hand. And similar to you, like I don't want to bug them. Like they have a million people bugging them, and the last thing I want to do is that. But you see somebody like that, and like the little kid in me seems to come out and freak out because you're like, oh my goodness, that's Mario Andretti, right? Like it's really really cool. And I do think most of those guys, especially if they're at the track or at an event, know that there's going to be a light shined on them. That's maybe a little different than if they're in the general public, but they uh, same experience for me. And anytime I've met any of them, just all for the most part, really really nice people. And um, I get if they're trying to take off to catch a flight or anything, but it's just, I think one of the really cool parts about your job in general is being able to be in those environments where you get to see some of these high performers do their thing and operate at that high level, and even in general how they approach the general public. Just very cool, very very cool.
Yeah, we were actually across. We had, I think it was Magnaflow that was across from us last year at SEMA, and yeah, they had like every hour they had Mario was there, and they had all these celebrities. You're
Joey
thinking,
Logano, I saw him
yes,
there. Yeah, yeah,
yes,
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
you're thinking, I want to be over in the line getting an autograph, or I don't want to be standing over here working. I want to be over there, but it was really really cool to see that, and like you said, when you meet somebody and they're not a race car driver or whatever, but cars are their passion. There's probably not a lot of people that want to talk cars with those people. They want to talk other things. So it's like, holy crow, this guy knows his stuff. Like we had one of the guys, um, I think it was last year or the year before, Tim Allen called in, you know,
Wow.
and he just, he had questions on stuff. And it's one of those type of deals, where it's like, I just talked to Tim Allen on the phone. He said, I can't remember who talked to him, but it's like, man, he was the nicest guy in the world. Because obviously, when you call in on the phone, he's calling you, he's not getting bothered or whatever. And, obviously, he's a massive car guy. So, it's just really cool to see how down to earth those guys are. And obviously, if Tim was calling us, he's still working on his own stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really really cool to see those particular people, and they are very, very. That's one thing I will say about the performance industry. The majority of the people that are going to those shows, they're passionate about their cars. They love them, absolutely love them. So it's been an awesome ride so far. That's for sure.
It's got to be tough to tell Tim Allen that he's got a bad ground.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they were talking about, but yeah, that would be tough. But I think Tim's the type of guy that probably worked on his stuff long enough that he knew that. So yeah, that's a good point though.
Well, I think everything that AutoMeter is doing is obviously top notch. What you're doing, and honestly, to take the time to do the podcast today, explain some of the background of AutoMeter is just so cool, and I appreciate you joining us.
Well, I appreciate the time. It was great, and good luck with the license.
Yeah. Once we wrap up recording here, I'll report back to everybody on if I was able to make it through TSA today. So it should be an interesting day. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.